case you don't know who we are, Dark Sky Ireland, we've got funding from the Heritage Council. We've been going a few years. We're basically acting as a lobby group and a non-governmental organisation. So basically representing stakeholders around the country and being a trusted agent in interacting with lighting people as well as, you know, the demands for environment. So we work with astronomy groups. This is my third talk in about a month and a half. We're affiliated with Dark Sky International. We changed our name, or we adopted the name Dark Sky Ireland. They changed from the International Dark Sky Association to Dark Sky International to copy our initials. We monitor the skies. I have a number of monitors out, including in the center of the city, my own house. I'll show you some results from measurements down into Wicklow. Support dark sky areas. We have Kerry Dark Sky Reserve, Mayo Dark Sky Park, and now Dava Dark Sky Park. So being involved with all of those and getting those set up and supporting them. We also conduct different types of research. We've had people work on health, we've people working on bats, and so on. So I work on the light pollution itself, how that light gets out using novel techniques using satellite data and radiative transfer. Committee members, as I said, you know, I'll show you in a minute. We're a formal company. That's so we can get funding. So we have to earn enough money to pay for the accountants to show that we're not earning any money, right? Which is a problem. But we have a range of people. Georgia Macmillan may be familiar to some of you in Mayo Dark Sky Park. Mags in the Dark Sky Park as well. Kate McGaney works in Bat Conservation Ireland. There's that guy on the right you may be familiar with. He always has a question. Albert White, you may remember. Ray Butler, Joe Hogan, who supported us when we joined the European Southern Observatory. Great resource. Karen Astrologu, who's a lighting engineer, so we have a lighting professional on board. Some of you may be down Clock Jordan, for instance, or Newport. He's involved in actually introducing dark sky friendly lighting. And the other weird guy who's a contemporary of mine and also probably familiar to people from the Irish Astronomical Society, Niall Smith, director of Blackrock Castle Observatory. So what's the problem? Astronomers were first on the scene, if you like, because they realized that cases here like at Mount Wilson, I don't know if any of you have been there, nice view down off the hills. It's a skiing area for Angelinos because it's high enough. But the growth of light was, observatories were put in places which had pristine conditions, good sky quality conditions, steady atmosphere, but light has encroached on us, right? The scary thing is the current estimate is light is increasing about 10% per year globally. Right? So it can be more than that in some areas. And large number of children, from our point of view, I think all astronomers are involved in outreach. It always annoys me when I talk in my department. Oh yes, everybody does outreach. I said I didn't see anyone going to any talk of yours, but you know, people actually don't know what the sky is like unless you have outreach such as yourselves. Right? They can get disappointed because it's not Hubble quality, and that's an important aspect as activists and as people who are interested carrying over that and getting students that I get at the other end. Students coming through studying science because their spark was ignited by looking at the sky. And there's this interesting term, noctalgia, right? So something you're losing is the night. So the impacts are general. Other than on astronomy, they have much broader impacts. So the whole theme of watching the sky and warning about light pollution, if you like, was kicked off by astronomers, and they did the calculations about how it was spreading. But it's affected everybody, and it's the realization then which slowly came to the environmentalists. And even in the 80s and 90s, it was discovered that the human eye has a sensor that no one had known about. Right? And that's sensitive to blue light, and that's what sets your circadian rhythm, sets your clocks. All your body is a combination of different clocks, and they're all reset every day when you see bright blue sky, which is why winter drags so long, right? What's interesting, you know, I found this image as well from work done by astronomers in the US. If you look at South America, so Ireland is a member of the European Southern Observatory. We've got these fantastic sites. The extremely large telescope, 39.3 meter diameter, will be going in place. But look, even in Chile now, that the light is starting to impinge on the observatories there as well. So this is not a topic for, the center of New York or the center of Paris, right? Both of which are very brightly lit. This is a topic that is worldwide and needs worldwide solution. And also you can see that the light extends a long way. Light knows no borders. If we look at Dublin, I have some images. They're limited. They're generally done by hand. So I think the first good images taken with the space station were by an amateur astronomer who thought, surely when I'm looking down, its ground is rushing by 36,000 kilometers per second, whatever that, or 3,000 kilometers per second, that this is light astronomy, right? So he made something like a Ponset map, taking a power drill and some bits and pieces up in the shuttle. He actually drove the camera and lens to track the Earth, so working back as the spacecraft moved, whereas we normally will be tracking the sky. And some of these images are quite sharp. So if we look at 2015, we can see the bright white lights. We can see some of the Mercury type lighting here as well. You can see down sports stadia and so on. And then we can identify particular buildings. This odd shape is Croke Park. It's the lights to help the grass grow. Because if you think about it, when it's getting hammered, it's in the winter and the sun is low in the sky, the grass doesn't have time to recover. We've got bright areas. This one, an architectural design award, and I think there's gas lamps as well. Smithfield, yeah. So, and some of the images, you can see it's changed color as you go over it. These buildings here, again, brightly and overlit. This has always caused mirth when I ask, is this a window or a skylight at meetings? We got the Beckett Bridge really stands out as an overlit bridge as well. So there are individual sources that contribute quite strongly to the light. But there are other cases where things have improved. So if we look at the 2015 picture, you can see along the road here, for instance, when we step to 2021, Transport Infrastructure Ireland has brought these roadways into alignment with the current regulations. You may have noticed this down the country that you'll see lampposts that are switched off. So they're switched off for a year. If nobody complains, then they're removed because they're a traffic hazard, right? About 2% of accidents, at least in Germany, are caused by people crashing into lampposts. Okay. But we can see changes. Larry Ratdown has moved over to a lot of light-emitting diode technology. Actually, the M50 is dimmed in the early hours of the morning, but no one ever notices. So it's dimmed down because the traffic rate is less. We can see areas such as up here where LEDs have come to the fore. And we can see a lot of the color here. So the LED light technology is, what we do, we can light up more places and make it more attractive, as it were, with architecture. So there's been a growth of light, cheap to install, easy to install around the rims or edges of buildings, for instance, compared with the old technology that was quite hard to implement. So predominantly in the old days, most of the things were low pressure and high pressure sodium. Low pressure, beloved by astronomers. I used to have a Ratten filter for taking photos when I lived in Donnybrook because it would block out most of the sodium light. Large number of hours annually, but the move is more towards efficiency. They have better light control if implemented correctly. Right? So the light is more directed downward. We can see that in the image here as well, or if you go into the foothills. I was up there for the night of the aurora, looking down in the residential areas. There's less light going up into the hills, but there's a lot of light coming from these commercial areas, which is poorly directed. But again, hey, light is cheap. So we're not seeing an overall reduction in light. So yes, it can be done right, but it doesn't mean that it is being done right. Okay. So we're supporters of trimming and dimming, so reducing the hours that lighting is active, dimming it where possible. Again, the road lighting is proportional to, or should be proportional to the amount of traffic. In the wee hours, it doesn't need to be lit to the same extent. We follow the UK, the British standards, and they have gone that route, so it shouldn't be a case that we can't. What we're also supporting is moving to warmer lighting, so lighting that is more similar to the sodium lighting. It is a continuous lighting, but lighting without excessive brightness in the blue, which besides being at the point which triggers our melatonin, as I say, our circadian clock, is exactly where our nighttime vision is sensitive. And we're all aware, when you do averted vision, you're using the outside of your eye that is much more sensitive to blue light, right? It's about 10 times more sensitive than the cones in your eye. Okay? But it means when they install these lights, the LED lights, a lot of the complaints are people saying, you tried to save energy, but it's brighter than the light that was there. That's because it's tickling our night vision as well as our day vision. And that also means that our dark adaptation is a lot more affected by these types of light that are being installed. It's relatively new. Nobel Prize was given less than a decade ago. It has basically blue LED, like anything that was trendy had this small eye in front of it. We have iLOFAR, for instance. Peter is into Apple. And basically that's the driving LED, and then there's a fluorescent coating that then changes it into a whiter light. You may have seen light cases where that coating is gone. You get this very harsh, bright light, ultraviolet rich, about 20 times the level it should be. Right? So we're working with people like the Road Management Office, and there's positive outcomes in there. We pushed for a while to go from the general light level that's installed. The technology doesn't look at the light in the blue. All the regulations are based on the fact that lighting is equivalent to heating something up, an old filament or a gas lamp. Right? So the light is just in the middle of the visual. It doesn't believe there's any light in the blue. And similarly, when we talk about the quality of the light or the spectrum of the light, it's done in terms of temperature. So most of the LED lighting is equivalent to 4,000 Kelvin. That's the white light we see installed generally on roads. We recommend something of 3,000 Kelvin or less. So that's more like the old halogen light. It's a warmer light, it's more comfortable. We persuaded the Road Management Office to put some tests in, and they went, oh, yeah. They said, when we saw them side by side, it was a no-brainer, right? That is, in residential areas particularly, it's a lot more acceptable as a light. But the regulation they put in and said if 20% of the lights have changed to 4,000, then the 80% have to match that. So that's something that we haven't succeeded with. Transport Infrastructure Ireland also, as I said, are more aware and reducing the amount of light on the major roads, national roads, and the motorways. They've also inherited the greenways, and we're sort of pushing them to not light those areas. There's a big drive again from the green side, get people to commute in the winter and it's dark, so light the greenway. Our argument would be, why do you go down a greenway? You want to protect the environment. Right? Case of LED, not a million miles away in Rathmines. It's watching you. This was well overlit. I do not understand. This was done in for green policies. So they got rid of 2 regular billboards, I think on Camden Street. They put in an animated LED billboard. There are people who live here and they complain, this is at a junction, right? So apparently it was green to change it so you don't have the mess of looking at 2 billboards in town. Instead, you've got a huge light source. And this one as well. The problem with these is they're horizontal, or they're throwing out light horizontally, and that will propagate eventually into the wider environment. These are also the ones on the street as well, you've probably seen, or in shop windows. And I think they're distraction. I think they're overbright. What you want to do, there's some useful stuff, right? They'll tell you the temperature, but I think if you're out and you've got a nose and fingers, you probably know the temperature, right? Mm-hmm. The big ones consume about a kilowatt, right? So how is this in any shape or form green? The reason is this is bringing in money, okay? But if you thought about it, if I go down the street and put down a 1 kilowatt heater every so often, there'd be uproar, right? In terms of climate change. But we're doing this, right? It's been a big issue in Paris as well. Commercial light, beautiful building, so therefore no idea of using curtains. We've got energy efficient glass, but it doesn't stop the light coming out. Other countries have moved along the road to say there's no one there. turn the lights off, right? Once the cleaners have gone, turn the lights out. But it's been used as a vanity project, if you like. This is the Dean down in Cork. You can see where most of that light is missing the building, going up into space. Certainly a waste. The Mary McAleese Bridge. The first time I saw this, I thought it was a cry for help because I saw a bat symbol on the sky. But that's just the shadow of this Contraltus Bridge lit by rectangular floods. And what's really weird is you see there's LEDs here. These are full cutoffs. These are ones that are very well controlled in terms of light performance. But then you floodlight the whole structure. It's over the Boyne, where there's salmon. It's downstream from a World Heritage area, which has connections with, the sky. It's crazy. These colored lights as well, again, throwing light out horizontally. And these are sort of endemic around these states on the periphery of towns in Ireland. Sports lighting, you can see as well, here's the blue component. It does scatter, it's Rayleigh scattering, so we get a lot more scattering from this part of the light as well. And it'll scatter. The good news is it tends to scatter and die, randomize locally more than an orange light. Residential lighting, that's something maybe we contribute to as well. It's a place near me. Isn't it pretty to light the house? See, most of that is missing the building. Why are we lighting trees? There was a park on the north side. I think now they've taken the wind turbines and the lighting out. That got an award because it used green energy to light the place up at night. What about the insects? What about the bats? Right. So on the one hand, again, we're looking at more of the vanity. Isn't it nice that we've done this? And on the other side, you're saying, oh, what is the cost? Monetary and in terms of environment. Now, lighting may not be a huge make or break in terms of the environment. But if you think about all the stressors we have, it can be as big as climate change for some things. You have a tree beside it, and that tree hangs onto its leaves in winter. It's certainly getting more stormy. That tree is keeping water up in the top of the tree in the winter. Insects are affected. And for myself, I was sort of, this again is a light near me. This is about 5,000 or 6,000 kelvins, really bright blue. I thought, well, I'm not seeing any insects around my light, but that's because when you're looking towards the light, you glare. I would suggest that you find a light near you, stand below the light, and then look away, and you'll probably find there are insects going around in circles until they drop, right? So it does have an impact. We can contribute to that as well. So typical households, about 11 bulbs. If one of those is an outside light, a security light, then we can actually contribute about as much as all the public lighting in the country, right? So it's something where we can take action. Even if we have solar powered lights, we shouldn't have the light. So what's the green transition? Well, we've got green LEDs. Anyone who's been down Henry Street, this took my fancy, right? I don't know how this thing cools and whether it's dead by now, but the louvers on the back for the cooling have led to a little microcosm there. So a certain green success. If we look back at 92, we can see the rural areas and down the west coast here as well. And then you step forward. What you notice is, okay, the centers of the city are pretty much bright to start with. But what we see are the spread of light into the rural environment, the growth of places which are, I know people who commute from here to Dublin, right? Cheaper housing, you commute long distances, then you have, bigger community, you've got lights, you've got community centers, you've got shops and so on. So we've led to a spread of light across the country. In terms of, the growth of light from satellites, we can see that in the period of the Celtic Tiger, is anyone still, or is this going to be one of those things you say, remember the Celtic Tiger, and half the people go, when was that? The development in the country, the light was basically driven by two main things. One is the net immigration. Again, maybe something we'll live to regret. And then also the growth and prosperity. Particularly now we have things like Intel's, we've got data centers and so on. They all need light. We've got, I should have pointed out, the distribution center for Tesco on the north side. And the nice thing is, as a scientist, because the weather is so hard and to handle in satellite data, because 2/3 of the time it's cloudy, what you really like is a check on your numbers. You want a comparison star, right? So what we have is Northern Ireland, and that just follows more or less a straight line. The row up here is, I believe, is because of the influx then of the LED lighting. So it's reducing the light going up to space. It doesn't mean the light is reduced. It means the light seen by this satellite has gone down. Right? So it's not the same thing. And we have a strong commercial component. So it grew 10 times faster. Question is that what we should be doing? You can look online at hidden bit here, lightpollutionmap.info, if you want to plan locations to go observing. Positive thing here is we're on the periphery. So there's nothing between here and North America. So the dark sky areas that we still have, the remnants, are down the west coast, the really dark skies. And the other way of looking at it, if you come from the continent, you can get a flight to Ireland and see those dark skies. Now, we're probably more focused on the stars, but also think of it, a dark environment is something that most people won't have grown up with. 60% of the population lives in a city. And as my colleague George's mother said, we moved from Mayo to London, I was only afraid of the dark when I moved to the city. Right? It's a natural environment for us. And even more so, because most of the time it's cloudy, most of the time in Ireland, it should be below normal, right? So there's no stars, no Milky Way, no planets. It's going to be really dark. If you've not experienced a really dark rural sky, you've missed out, right? Hand in front of the face. You do adapt after a while. So the growth here, I'm going to need to update these, but the figures have not changed too drastically since then. These are done by a large-scale computational project I helped contribute to Irish measurements to this, so it should be reasonably. We're limiting where we have to go. You have to go further and further away. I remember, coming back towards Dublin. Used to be when you got near Blessington, you'd see the lights of Dublin. Now you see the lights of Blessington from Bolton glass. Right? So there has been a real spread in the light. So this is something. We can view it as a precious resource we have to protect, but also something that we promote that other people don't have. And the impacts, this is done by Ray Butler. So there's the ISS, either that or North Korean missile, but I think it must be the ISS. And I think Clifton in there as well. So we can see, even in a dark sky, we're getting the impacts here from more distant objects. And the estimates that I did, are about with the old-fashioned lighting, the high-pressure sodium, only maybe about half to 3/4 of the light is useful. A lot of it is hard to put on the ground because you have a cylindrical light, and you've tried to get, with heating constraints and so on, is actually thermal constraints, is try to direct that light usefully where it wants to go. And there's a large part that actually goes directly up, and we see that as sky glow. This bit, as I said, the horizontal bit would probably be the rural light pollution. This would be when we see the overcast sky in Dublin, for instance, in Trinity. So I think it's the closest observatory to any city centre, 800 meters from the spire. When it's clear, the scattering of the molecules in the air gives you a sky that's about 35 times the natural sky. When it's overcast, it's 1,100 times. So that's the light we're sensitive to that would normally escape to space. So that's the real estimate of the waste, if you like. And really noticeable, if you take a picture with your smartphone, you'll see a lit sky behind it. You'll see the color in it. There are that many photons coming back down. We did not evolve in an environment or any of the animals around us. 60% of Irish mammals are nocturnal or crepuscular, twilight animals. They have not evolved to deal with this. We can deal with the range of about 1,000,000 to 1 in terms of light levels or more, right? You can read a book by the full moon. Yet we increase the light levels. We spend the money and the carbon increasing the light levels to levels that are more similar to daytime. And what happens? Well, our pupils get smaller, so you don't gain as much as you think. So the impact, it goes into a wider environment. So this is from North Wales. Again, this is a fisheye image from Ray. This is a view of Neowise from the Dublin foothills. That light is propagating out away from it. And a large part of the population actually never gets to use its night vision. It's maybe in a twilight, it's using both, but it's not actually dark adapted. So we can see that. I have actually a better image, but from North Wales is about 120, 130 kilometers, I think, this image. So in the dark side, these are measurements done with the sky quality meter, a little like the unit I have here, except an automated one. So you press a button and you can get a reading. If the battery works, and it doesn't. But if we look along here, these are individual days. So you have twilight, and then the moon comes up, and the moon is up for the night and then sets. Next night, the moon is rising at a different time. Right? So we see a daily cycle, we see a monthly cycle. When we look at the city, though, what we see is a disruption of that cycle. So there's no strong rhythm into the sky. And as I said, we're familiar with that being urban astronomers for the most part. The effect for us is we lose a huge amount of the impact. And the key to this is, if we just think simply that all stars are like the sun and we spread them out in space uniformly, there's going to be a lot more faint ones than bright ones. Right? That's always the case in science. There's more, small grains of sand than there are boulders, more boulders than there are mountains. Right? It's a property of our science. So it's even more so, and if you haven't seen a really dark sky and got lost in it, the constellations are relatively easy to find, or the asterisms are easier to find in a city. If you don't get confused in a dark sky, it's not dark, right? But we're losing then, if we change our limiting magnitude, you see there's a huge fall off in the quality of the sky for an astronomer, and the quality of the sky for the environment, the insect life as well. So there are things maybe you don't know. It's only peripheral to the argument here. But for instance, we discovered that the African dung beetle uses the plane of the Milky Way to guide it as it navigates at night. Somebody's got to go clean up all that out, right? You ever go, the tourists are coming tomorrow. So they roll it up and they navigate. And the way to check that is someone was brave enough to put plastic down in their planetarium and move the sky around, and the beetles actually changed direction. So we think about stupid animals and lower life of insects, but they have grown up in this environment. They've made use of the nighttime cues. And if we remove those, and also nobody's really looked at the effects of polarization, for instance. If we blur all that out, these cues are being lost. What have they got recourse to? Right? So we have it's hidden here. I'll have a link at the bottom. The portal sky, really pristine to suburban sky. So this is based on measurements I took. If we go down the military road effectively, then you're basically looking at the nighttime sky. And as we go down, I've mapped it into a case of how many of the technically available stars are we able to see, right? And the proportion will increase when we get down to about Roundwood and beyond. And after that, it's never going to be perfect. And the sky is pretty good, right, from our point of view. We look at, you can see that as well, satellite image from, I think this is 2021, 2022. Again, no adjacent sources here. So unintended consequences, what we haven't fully appreciated is, the percentage of animals that are nocturnal. Of course, bats being a case in point, amphibians. We normally think, well, we see frogs around or tadpoles around during the day when we go out walking. Mammals, large number are nocturnal. Invertebrates and primates. The rhythms of the day, and more specifically, the sensitivity to light, the melatonin, the sensors are very, very primitive. Plankton in the water will move up and down the water column, depending on the light level. Or phosphorescence in the ocean will turn off if the light level goes high. So it's not just that we feel a bit grumpy when we're disrupted. It's the fact that it's a very low level. It's, if you like, it's even below our operating system. Right? It's in the firmware. It's hard coded into our body. It's not something that we can choose to turn off. It's at the lowest cells that evolved, that were then built up into mammals and built up into humans. So that's something that needs to be taken on board. We get the feeling that we can play God and change night into day, but our system is a very old system. It's billions of years old inside. Never mind the hydrogen going back to the Big Bang. But what we don't know are where the thresholds are for a lot of these, but it can be very, very low for humans. For fish, for instance, we're seeing a loss of fish, we're seeing a crash in insects. We're probably having an effect by spreading this light so rapidly without necessarily enough knowledge to know what it is we should be looking for. And these effects may only be known 20, 30 years down the line. So the driver is being to protect the environment from climate change, but the implementation could be the very thing that's destroying the species that we're trying to protect. Just an example, I won't labor the point, but in birds, shearwaters, for instance, which we do have off the coast, the young look for light because that's where the moon would reflect on the sea. So they go down to sit below the lights and they'll wait and they starve, right? So this happens in the Canaries, which is also, of course, near an observatory. There's been a growth in light for the tourist trade, and these things will just die, right? They glide down, they're not able to really fly, they glide down, and if they land on the sea, then they can eat and feed. But what we have here, for those of you interested in birds, springtime is different species of different times of the day, right? When they sing to be heard and to look for a mate. What we have here is the time relative to sunrise. So the chaffinch sings fairly close to sunrise, the blue tit before that, gray tit before that, the blackbird, and the robin you probably hear. But if we have light, that gets shifted back because now there's more light. Robins will sing hours before the dawn. Right? Early bird catches the worm mightn't be up. Okay, but certainly even in winter, I can hear robins sing, say at 3 a.m. around my place. I don't know. I've asked ecologists when do they actually sleep, right? And what is the benefit for them? So for human health, as I say, we have this mix of LED light bulbs. The US has gone to 5,000-6,000 Kelvin because there was a big push to save energy. They went strongly say, only LEDs, these type, go. And now they're beginning to regret that there's pushback, mainly by people with astronomy or dark sky interests, but trying to take those out and replace them. And the real cost is not these units, which are a few hundred, right? It's the cost of sending the guy out and going up on the crane and cherry picker and taking them out and swapping them over. So you really need to think, is it going to stay there 20 years or I'm going to be changing it in a few years? The incandescent bulb and the candle, these are warmer sort of colors. When you take your dearly beloved out, you probably wouldn't take them to like a hospital waiting room. You'd probably go for the candlelit supper, right? And these are also, we can get LEDs down at these sort of temperatures. They're less efficient, but again, you see they're missing this strong blue spike, which is the one that we believe is most disruptive. There's also an element of social justice, I should have mentioned, with that LED display, the billboard. You live in the city center where it's very brightly lit, where you have a billboard or a streetlight right outside your bedroom. You're in a one-bedroom apartment. That's somewhat unfair compared with those of us who live in the suburbs. Right? So you're forcing people to accept a light level that you wouldn't tolerate yourself. And even if, that is an issue in your area, you can request the council to actually put a shield on it. I did that in my case because I found, even though I was told officially there shouldn't be any light, you don't mess with the scientist who's got equipment. The other thing we should mention, of course, is important, it's sort of built in, is why we go out is be part of the universe. I never quite fathomed how the astronomy can make you feel very, very small, but yet a part of something much bigger, right? There's a visceral feeling of going out in the dark. And if you go out with a group of people, there's that connection. And there's something you can share with all ages. It's not something that you need a PhD in, right? It's something you experience. The first meteor you see, the first viewing of Saturn's rings. I was talking to one of my students, and that was a big thing for him as well. And it still sticks in my mind. It was impossible. How did the rings not fall out? But there's just so much beauty. And when I worked with Hubble, if there wasn't one image every week or so that didn't make you awed, right, you're in the wrong job. It's beautiful. You can understand the physics, but it should just go, wow, right? So we've evolved to deal with the nighttime environment. We've got connections to the sky. We've got orientations of our archaeologists. People like Frank Prendergast could tell you. But the light disconnects us from that nighttime environment. And even more so, we're sitting by our big LED screens getting blasted with photons that would probably disrupt our sleep. Maybe we have the light on outside for security, right? Or maybe to make the garden look pretty. We're not there to see it, right? We need to think of the environment and our contribution. Outings provide a connection, right? Pulls people together. And the other thing that's built into the European approach, and that is not really taken into account here, is a precautionary principle. Here's a technology that hasn't been on the market very long. We can see that there's an important change happening in terms of climate change, the impact, the insect crash. I think most people remark if you drive down the country and come back, the front of the car is not covered with insects the way it used to be. Right? You don't experience things the same. It's getting more sterile, and we're losing species. And remember that we're on an island, so it's not a question of them moving to a different part. They just die out, right? We have had a star party at Mouth, again, courtesy of you guys. We'll ignore the light source. This is another example of radio scattering here.
That's actually me.
I didn't want to name names. That wasn't a great night in terms of astronomy, right? But man, to be beside the chamber tomb, and that site's been occupied for about 1,000 years or so, and people are buried in subsequent generations. Wasn't it an experience?
It was brilliant. Absolutely.
And that's something we want to implement. The OPW, I wrote a piece for their magazine, and it was in the same issue, like, we put LED lights in the Phoenix Park. We need to do more of this. We need to increase awareness, right? And how would this look like with a cloudy sky? Right? He wasn't from Ireland. So what about the future? There are some positive takes. There are places like Newport, population currently of about 800. This is the way the church was lit. So there was a car park here, and then floodlights shining in your eyes. You came into the car park in the winter. You can see shadowing here. Most of that light is missing the structure. At the very simplest, there's a colleague who takes pictures from the location of the flood and then laser cut a steel plate. If anyone is into laser cutting, there's a market here for that. You could make, those masks for the architectural lighting and instantly improve the situation. Other countries limit the amount of waste light that avoids these structures. There were swifts trying to nest in this building. This is the current lighting being implemented by Karem and his group Dark Source, and the swifts are in here. The light level is a lot lower. And what we can do, the nice thing is, using the satellite data, I can show that there are implementations of switching the lights and turning off the floodlights and putting in the new lights. So we've seen a 50% drop in the light going into space. Okay. And that's, I see as one of my contributions as a scientist. We don't know what it is. Give us a number. Are we better? What number are we trying to hit? The whole country, is trying to look at beam counting. So this is the light pollution beam counting. And this is an image from the Conic Telegraph, but this is after the implementation of the lighting. Now, some of this light is coming from the adjacent streets that have not been switched over. But this is quite a change in sky compared with the really dark. Okay, this is a really dark sky. Same as you stand below a street light, and it's nice and dark because your pupils are so small. But what a difference, right? This church is on a hill. It really stands out when you come into the town. It's on the borders of Mayo Dark Sky Park. And what's wonderful is that with the work Georgia and her colleagues have done down there, is people have engaged in that. And they go, it's our park. We want to promote it. We want to encourage tourism. People come to see dark skies. you're coming in the shoulder season or the off season, right? When it's dark. It's not summer twilight. And of course, as I said, I keep saying it's cloudy 2/3 of the time, right? So if you're going to come, you need to stay a few nights, and you need to stay preferably away from the town. So this is what sold it in Kerry, right? 1.5 million people at the time, I think, they did the Ring of Kerry. Most of them got on a tour bus, had lunch in Killarney or back in Dublin. The money went into the hotel chains. If you can get 1% of them to stay locally, that's a big impact on local populations. And that's an impact on sustainability. Maybe a community now can keep people paid off season and take pride and grow from that. And that's something that we're seeing in the Mayo with the Mayo Dark Sky Festival. More towns are saying, well, why are you having it in Newport or Mulranny? Why don't we have it in Ballycliffe? Why don't we do it? Right? They want to get engaged because now they realize they have something that other people don't have and they can promote. And as I said, it's not just the astronomy. It's nighttime walks, right? I took the nighttime walking with COVID and just walk, I don't need a head torch in the hills because there's enough light. Thank you very much. What's scary for me is with Dublin, you can see in some parts, you can see shadows cast by the city lights, right? If you walk in the dark. But people who have it now a dark sky know what they've got, know the value of what they have and the value to their community. So the winds, I say, cost to provide the light. It reduces, turning it off reduces another stressor. As I said, it may not be the most important stressor, but it's certainly an additional one to marginal populations. It gives us access to the wider world. It has health benefits. We sleep better. We have a more natural cycle. The other thing that occurred to me when we had those hot summers, right, when we leave the window open, you want to pull the curtains, but if you pull the curtains and the light comes in, you're not given a choice, right? But it's going to be an increasing case. Those nights are going to get warmer. The tourism potential, we had a citizen science survey in the Irish Times some years ago, and there were 80% were interested in dark sky events. What is it? Show us, right? Half the park is after dark, so our park service is interested as well, right? Why protect it during the day and destroy it at night? Again, light has a long travel, but it's the only form of pollution. If you turn off the light, the pollutant stops. Right? You think about it, the plastic bags stay up in the tree for a long time, right? Pollution in the water could stay in the soil for a long time. But the light will stop. It may not improve immediately, but you're on track then. And I don't understand, we try to make the case with the councils, for instance, why floodlit your buildings at night and talk about what you're doing in terms of climate change. My own university, I keep saying, who's listening to the recording? But we had Green Week, and one of the things that happened one year is to bring in green or LED floodlights and put green gels so you light up all the buildings in green. I was trying to explain that was literally greenwashing, right? But it's energy efficient. We're buying it from, no, but it's extra. What we haven't looked at is the photons, right? We're producing more. And my argument would be, same as we're more sensitized with Attenborough, if you found a cheaper way to produce plastic bags, should you produce more plastic bags? And you go like, well, no, there's pros and cons, right? Maybe we can use the money for something else. Right? Now, that's something that we've made a real change in here. The smoking ban is another one. We can make sea changes in our approach, provided we get enough momentum. And once we pass the threshold where then there's peer pressure. Right? But we need to consider not just whether the energy is efficiently produced or efficiently used. And LEDs aren't awfully efficient, really. So sodium lights are in some ways better. But, should we, right? So it's actually the thought behind it. So what can we do with different types of light? These old ball lights radiate in all directions, about 40% goes up. Better ones, you don't send light above the horizontal. The best one is directed where you want it. So don't use blue-rich light. Illuminate what needs to be lit. It seems fairly obvious, but you look at where the light is scattering, right? Use it where required, for the time it's required, and the level, right? And for me, all these security lights, there are some areas near me, I walk on the opposite side of the road that triggers the security light. And when I know I'm coming up, I'll look away because I don't want to be blinded by the light. So what kind of security is it where I'm deliberately not looking at that area, right? So it's, we need to do the right lighting. If you want to contribute, I'd be interested in getting naked eye limited magnitude observations, or sky quality meter, or the portal class. That's something as a community maybe we could do and survey a few more areas. If you want to experience dark sky conditions, oh bless, it's really small. But it's in a bigger park. I think Terry mostly was sort of behind this. Is near the Begmore stone circles, which are alignments. And it sticks in my mind. We went there, and Terry was showing us. He had lights, candles in paper bags. It was all very nice. Minimal amount of lighting. And we're standing there going, like, yeah, it could be a good dark sky site. And then bang, the local GAA pitch came on. Right? And there's a problem with that it still isn't resolved, because for hurling, you need to illuminate a cuboid. So you can't direct the light down. It needs to be able to see the ball. So that's different from other sports. But in general, the push has been giving money to get communities playing sports switch to LEDs. And the level of light is propped up. And they're using those lights then, even if you're walking around the pitch, you're using the waste light from that. So we've talked to the GAA, Mayo Dark Sky Park, Kerry Dark Sky Reserve, and now there's an extended area now with the increased park. But we only have about less than 2% of the country has protection. But it's sort of nominal, right? Because we're not putting lights in the park. But remember, the light can come from the surroundings. There's no wall, right? And what I say is, light, there's a feeble light, but what would it be like if we didn't have that? Right? We didn't catch the feeble light with James Webb. We didn't catch the feeble light with our telescopes that we're struggling to get. I really like this picture. And we get, as I said, Dark Sky Ireland get funded from the Heritage Council. I've got some funding from Sustainable Energy. Again, as you can measure active areas of light use at night. In terms of Dark Sky Ireland, please feel free, pick up a flyer or look at our site. We also have some YouTube videos sent from the meeting in Trinity. But this is our strategy, if you like, influencing policy. And if it's something you want to get engaged with, again, please let me know. All right, thank you for your attention.